Hello again, everybody, and welcome back to the Accelerator with Michael Conniff. That's me. I'll be your host today on a podcast devoted to founders, entrepreneurs, startups, and also angels, VCs, family offices, and investment firms that follow them closely. We are on all the major podcast platforms, including Apple, Amazon, Audible, and so on. Also on Spotify and YouTube in video and audio, as you can see if you're watching on one of those platforms. Make sure to rank us, rate us, subscribe to us, share us. We love that. We've got thousands of people looking at the podcast now, so it'd be great to have you on board. Today, we are joined by a couple of friends from Mexico, Sofia Benedicto and Jorge Gonzalez. Welcome, guys. Good to have you. Welcome you both.
Thank you. Good to be here.
Jorge is a co-founder and CEO of NodaLab, which is a podcasting company in Mexico. And Sofia is creative director of NodaLab. And Sofia and I have had many conversations. This is the first time I've spoken with Jorge. So, Jorge, tell me if you can describe the business and sort of what you're trying to accomplish with this company.
Okay. So NodaLab was born out of a vision to help creators and just people in general profit and make a living out of their passion. And we find that podcasts is a medium that is very welcoming and has a low barrier of entry. So it really, gives us the ability for all of us to be creators and for all of us to sort of make content in that is approachable, that people can make with their own hands, and also that can be very elaborated and can also become this piece of art as well. So it has a lot of potential.
Podcast is art. I love it. That's great because actually this is a podcast, so you're talking about us, right? Sofia, we've talked a number of times, and I know that you're a good person to explain the podcasting industry in Mexico in particular, and also from a global perspective. What's going on?
Yeah, so thank you for having us here in the Accelerator, Michael. So there's 200 million content creators in the world, and this industry is worth more than $100 billion, right? So in terms of podcasting, there are more than 4 million podcasts out there, and this industry is now worth up to $13 billion. But there's one problem. Only 1% of all of this content actually monetize, right? And in average, a content creator spends almost 6 months and a half, like working nonstop to make a living out of their passion, which is in this case podcasting or digital audio, until they make their first campaign or they make their first sponsorship. And that is if there is enough mojo and enough motivation for them to keep going, right? And in Mexico and in Latin America, the industry is growing. It's growing a little bit slower than it is growing in the United States or in other countries, for example, Spain. But there is not a platform that can make and can give and provide with tools to podcast creators for them to make a match with brands and be able to monetize themselves, their content. So that's what we're doing in NodaLab. We're building a platform to empower these creators and give them tools to professionalize their content to make it like go to the next level and be able to match with brands, big, medium, or small, and to make a living out of their content.
So tell me what the tools are that you provide them with.
Yeah, so we're providing them with content creation tools with our platform, from the pre-production to the creation of of a concept, to post-production, and then the most important and attractive part of this like toolkit is to give them ways to monetize themselves. So, for example, here in Mexico and Latin America, the cross promotion strategy is still like getting to know itself, and the pulse swaps are starting to be like a common strategy on podcast growing. So we're on a constant lookout to introduce podcasters to each other and to make them grow their audiences, to make like a matchmaking between them and also between the brands. So we're looking to, for example, if there's a podcaster that has a lot of audiences with, and their main topic is, I don't know, fruit, then we'll give and then we'll provide and we'll look for brands that want to advertise on those types of content, and we'll make the perfect match for them.
And Jorge, as CEO, what is your business model? How do you make money?
Well, basically, in the podcast industry, there's a few ways to monetize content, and there's also the, let's say, the costs of making the podcast, right? So we've sort of explored in different ways how to monetize. We've gone into, merchandise. We've gone into Patreon or things like that, right? In trying to see the best ways in which we can, make a profit out of podcasting. And we've realized that for Latin America, for Mexico, and perhaps even for all of, Spanish speaking countries, it's difficult to make the audience itself support you, right? I don't know. I think it's a cultural thing. I think when they do get that support, it usually comes from people, that maybe went to live in the US and they're making more money now, and then now they want to give back. But usually the people in Latin America are very, let's say, conscious about spending, right? And we don't even want to have like all of the streaming services at once, right? We want to pick a few. We don't want to spend too much on things. So I think for that reason, we sort of naturally found advertising as the best way, because we
So
found
just
results
so
with it.
you're so we're clear. Forgive me for interrupting, but you're saying subscriptions don't really work in Mexico and Latin America because for whatever reason people are different. They look at it differently. In the U.S., we have subscription fatigue now, but it's a relatively recent thing because people, when the streaming services started on video, people were signing up like crazy for all the shows. Now they're like, yeah, when was the last time I really looked at Hulu? And they're not, pulling back. But so you're saying advertising is a better avenue. Why is that? What is it about advertising that's appealing?
I think what makes advertising appealing, I would say, is that in Mexico we have big companies with big budgets that you know um, use advertising and have been using it for a long time. So there's already, let's say, a big industry in that, right? The advertising industry by itself is really big, but at the moment, only 1% of the total budget of advertising is going into podcasting. So it's a very new space. It's a very fresh space. So the potential for growth is enormous there. And so I think you and Sophia have discussed this a few times over your chats, but when it comes to podcasting, that's something that you can do for free, right? So many people do it for free, right?
not totally for free, but close, very low cost, very low.
Very low cost, exactly. Very low cost, and so when we're trying to see like how would we monetize and finding a business model, for us, I think charging people, let's say like, hey, have a subscription to host here your podcast, and then you can be here and you can get advertising opportunities. We found that people are very, they don't want to spend that money. They don't even want to have a subscription that's going to give them money, because they don't want the upfront cost and they don't want the fixed cost. They want to do it as close to free as possible. So we've realized that the best way to do this is by bringing value to the creators and giving this value, well, not for free, but let's say that we're gonna take a commission, um, from the brand that's advertising, and we're gonna help that creator get more, let's say, monetizing opportunities. But we're not gonna charge the creator, because I think creators are already, on low budgets. And we've also seen this when we've done production services for creators, like, they run out of money and then they cannot keep with their podcast. So they had this very professional product, but then they were expecting results in 6 months up to a year, and they were spending a lot of money into it. And then they sort of, they lose motivation when they cannot, monetize after a year. And so I think we have to give creators the best chances. And so I think we don't have to, sort of look at them in terms of, let's charge these people. I think we have to look at the big brands, and also the big media companies, and either, sell them advertising or sell them on branded content, which also, helps these companies communicate in a more human way, and use this as a marketing strategy for their company. So I think like the B2B market in podcasting is where it's at in Mexico, at least, and maybe also all of Latam.
And Sophia, you are creative director. So tell us, if you can, what are the podcasts that seem to be working best on your platform, NodaLab?
I think, in terms of categories, the most attractive podcasts for brands are, obviously wellness and health,
Why, why,
sports.
why wellness and health? I don't know that that's obvious. Why? What is it about those that work the best?
Well, wellness and health are, is like a very big and very popular category, worldwide, right? Everyone wants to get better physically, mentally. With We have a lot of stress, a lot of anxiety, like worldwide. I mean, that is, I think, something that we are all struggling. And, in terms of, maybe, lacking of money or lacking of a job, or the if you live in a city, then you are, at a very very, fast, pace, and you want to slow down maybe a little bit. And, that I think that necessity of getting well and getting better as a human, um, find uh, you can find it in that category, and on the podcast industry. And then also, I think comedy podcasts and sports podcasts are like really attractive to brands. And I think I think those three categories, and also fiction, of course. But, in terms of, for content creators and for brands, I think, Um, I think these three categories are like the most attractive because they have a lot of engagement with their audience. They feel their audience feel like very connected to the hosts.
Mm-hmm.
So the host read ads are more effective in terms of conversion rates, in terms of making an impact on the consumers, and um, yeah, I think these three are like the most attractive um, in um, yeah in the region.
Yeah. Okay. So what has been so you're basically going to an advertiser model. What's Jorge? What is the pitch to advertisers when you go in and you're trying to sell a podcast in Mexico?
Okay, so
Is it
yeah,
audience? Is it reach? Is it
yeah.
branding? Why should they do it?
I think, there's a lot of factors that come into play. I think, um, for one is like, for example, let's consider radio, right? Which is also a form of audio advertising. Radio usually, it's, let's say, it's within a region, right? That you're gonna put this advertising, and you're gonna target
Mhm.
a certain audience that listens to that station, and based on a region. But that's about it, right? And you're gonna have sort of a calculation of how many listeners you have and how many impressions you get, but you're
Right,
not
but
gonna get.
I think what you're
Yeah.
saying is there's no targeting. They can't really target anybody.
What I'm saying is that the
Yeah.
data that you get is not as precise. Like, you can target as much as you can with podcast, because podcasting is all about the niche audiences, right? So you can know a lot about your audience, about their interests, and that is something that makes it very work very well with some brands, especially I think the podcasting audience is a more affluent audience, right? So if you're a luxury brand, or a brand that's let's go back into the wellness space, right? Like, people that care about organic products, that that there's no, or vegan products, or that they are, let's say, fair trade, or something like that. Like, not everybody's going to be able to buy those kind of products, but if you're going to a podcast, you're going to target those audiences, and you're going to be able to speak to them directly in a very intimate way. So that's what I would say to advertisers, that you're going to get much more like precise data, and you're gonna be able to get to your target, right? You're gonna have better conversion because of that. And also, there's the thing about podcasting that is for advertisers right now. It's equal to innovation, right? So if they want to innovate and they want to keep up with what's coming, I think they have to come into this space, right? Like, right now we have the early adopters, and those are the kinds of companies that we're working with, and some of them are seeing, are seeing results, and are also excited about trying a different medium, and going to a space where they don't know how it works yet, and they find less competition, right, than
Hmm.
in other spaces. So I think it's a great opportunity, and it's gonna become mainstream eventually.
Yeah.
But right now we're starting to see more and more advertising in podcasts in Mexico. So I think the ball is already rolling, right?
Yeah. And Sophia, I think we can safely say that a lot of the success of podcasts has to do with the hosts. So, particularly if there's more than one host, then it's the chemistry of the hosts. It's sort of the feeling you get from the hosts. You end up, I listen to podcasts as much as anybody I know, and invariably, um, it's you feel some kinship with the host. So, who are you? Who are your most popular hosts on the NodaLab platform, and what is it about them that makes them popular?
Okay, so in terms of our original shows, I think Maria Andrea Araujo is one of our most popular hosts. Maria Andrea is a non-binary person. She's vegan. She cares a lot about animals, and it's like one of her main values is like respect. Anything, anywhere, anyone that's around you,
I'm
and
actually
also
I'm actually going to ask you to hold your mic up again. I think that it's that noise
okay,
is because the mic is being hit. Yeah, there we go. Try that.
yeah,
So
okay.
so that's in the health and wellness space.
That's in the health and wellness space, and then we also have in the like in an interview perspective with in an interview category, we have Juan Colucho, that's Mexican, sorry, an Argentinian actor that is a very curious person and a very cold person that wants to keep learning from other people and doesn't want like the necessarily like have the shine of his podcasts. He barely says a couple of questions, and then the interviewer almost has the complete space for them to tell the stories they want to share with people and then connect with their audience, right? And we also have a video podcast that's on Spotify. That's a comedy podcast mixed with improv games. That's called Échale Cabeza, and it's a podcast with three guys, three comedians that all are also very sports fanatics. Some of them are poker players and also actors. So that's quite an interesting mix of how things develop in the conversation, and I think that's super important. What were you saying about the host? I think it's super important because it doesn't necessarily has to be a super famous person. If they don't connect with people through the medium that is audio, it's gonna be very hard for the project to rise up, right? So I don't know if in the US you have seen this, but here in Mexico we have seen big companies making like huge deals with very famous influencers and then shut some of the projects down because they don't have the projected audiences that were initially put on the table. So I think for me, you have to be very unique, and you have to know the medium and know how to take advantage of it, uh, and and then the fame and success in the podcast industry will come naturally.
How do you take advantage of the medium?
Sorry?
How do you take advantage of the medium? How does one do that? And remember to grab your mic, Sophia. Remember to hold
Yeah.
it. Yes.
I think I think you have to I mean, it's okay if you do this initially as a DIY project, but eventually in the podcast industry, uh, even if you have like a low cost mic, as I am holding mine right now, you have to prepare your content, you have to practice your vocals, you have to practice your dictation, you have to practice in front of the mic how you speak to people, and also listen to yourself. I think it's a quite
It's
a
always
quite good practice.
I got that advice in radio. Is that, and it's sort of you're kind of reluctant to listen to yourself, but if you don't listen to yourself, you don't know what's working and what's not working. So yeah,
Yeah,
good
totally.
advice. Yeah. Now, Jorge,
Yeah.
we've got a few minutes left. Let me ask you, what is the future of podcasting, and what is the future of podcasting for NodaLab in Mexico?
Well, I would say podcasting is coming now on a bit of a, let's say, a transition phase where let's say we had this boom period from 2014, let's say, to 2022, where the industry just kept growing, and during the pandemic it exploded, right? So it at some point everybody was doing a podcast, and
Even me.
yeah, even
Even I actually have two of them now. So yes.
yeah. So those were obviously very good times for us, for all of us. And then at the end of 2021, we saw sort of a seismic shift in terms of, okay, suddenly there was this idea to turn podcasting into sort of, let's say, like Hollywood, right? Like,
Mhm.
let's turn the podcast industry something that resembles more like Hollywood
So that
and
would
all
be
of
that
that.
would be a star-driven kind of model, right?
Exactly, and big budgets, and just
Mhm.
throwing a lot of money into podcasting. And so that made people excited and want, to go into the space. But then suddenly we found that, you know, that that strategy was a bit of a, let's say, it was overdone, I would say. And so the companies, then the big companies, then started to back off, right? And they sort of became more conservative in terms of their strategies. And so right now 2022 was a year in which a lot of companies shut down, big layoffs in, tech companies, but in also like media companies and
Mhm.
podcasting companies. Studios closed, a lot of projects were canceled, and so right now I think we're sort of in that stage where we're sort of trying to find a way again back into that growth stage, but maybe try to give it some time, right? So I think podcasting needs time. You cannot force it. You cannot just spend a lot of money and invest a lot of money into it and expect it to give you results in 2 to 3 years. I think you need to go and think long term. So I think this is a long term game. We're very early, and especially in Mexico and Latin America, we're very early,
Yeah.
and and the audiences have yet to mature. So I would say this is a, it's a very bright future, but you have to think about it in terms of 5 years, 10 years. You cannot just start your podcast and think you're gonna make it in 1 year. Like the biggest podcasters, even right now, they've been doing it for at least 5 years, all of them, or most of them.
Yeah,
It's
yeah.
very hard to push a podcast.
I
Yeah,
listen pretty religiously to the podcast from a company called The Ringer. It was started by a guy named Bill Simmons. You may have heard of him. He's a sports
yeah,
celebrity in the U.S., but as a fan, he's like the number one fan. And I have been listening to him. I think it's like 13, 12 or 13 years. He's had a podcast that long. They call him the Podfather because he started so early. And not only that, but his podcasts on the Ringers, they all started early too. And so those are still the ones that I listen to. I try to listen to new ones, but um, there's only so much time in the day, and media consumption is a matter of habit usually. So I end up listening to the same people I listened to 10 years ago, which is kind of interesting. I want to remind everyone you're listening to the Accelerator podcast with Michael Conniff. That's me. I'm your host. And I want to remind you to watch the podcast, of course, or listen to it, but also to give us a review, ratings on Apple, Amazon, Audible, and many other platforms, including Spotify and YouTube. Also, want to tell you to check out my website at michaelconniff, CONNIFF.com. You can follow me on Twitter. A good place to follow me is on LinkedIn. I'm pretty active there as well. I want to thank you for listening, and also want to thank our guests, Jorge Gonzalez. He's the CEO and co-founder of NodaLab, and Sofia Benedicto. I think I can call you a friend, Sofia. We've talked a lot. She's creative director at NodaLab, and they are both trying to be pioneers in podcasting in Mexico and Latin America. So thank you so much for being with us. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Michael.
thank you for having us.
And I want to thank all of you out there for watching. And remember, we'll be back with another podcast before you know it.